Malcolm-Jamal Warner didn't just pass away. He left this world doing something that no one could ever imagine, something that turned a peaceful weekend into a lifelong memory of pain, guilt, and sacrifice. But you won't believe what really happened that day and why actress Jasmine Guy stayed silent for so long. The truth didn't come out in a magazine or in a press release. It came through quiet tears and a podcast that wasn't even meant to be heard by millions. And this is how it all began. For years, the world knew Malcolm as Theo Huxtable, the smart, funny, and charming son from The Cosby Show. But off camera, he was someone entirely different. He was quiet, loyal, and deeply protective of the people he cared about. He wasn't flashy, and he never chased the spotlight. Instead, he became the kind of person who stayed close to a few trusted friends. And one of those friends was Jasmine Guy. Now, here's where it gets interesting. What most people didn't know is that Malcolm and Jasmine weren't just industry friends, they were like family. Their friendship started back in the late 80s when both of them were at the peak of their fame. Jasmine had just begun shining on A Different World, and they first met at a private industry party thrown by Debbie Allen. That night, while everyone else talked about roles and fame, Malcolm and Jasmine connected on something deeper. They both hated the fake side of Hollywood. They wanted to tell real Black stories with meaning. That shared passion made them inseparable. Over time, they leaned on each other for support, for understanding, and sometimes just to survive the pressure that came with being famous so young. Malcolm became more than a friend to Jasmine. She once called him her emotional anchor, the person who always knew what to say when things fell apart. And for Malcolm, Jasmine was the one person he trusted without question. That bond became even stronger years later when Jasmine became a mother. She had a daughter named Amara, and although she kept her child away from cameras and public attention, Malcolm stepped into the role of an honorary uncle like it was second nature. He was there for birthdays, school events, quiet weekends, and even bedtime stories. Jasmine never had to ask. Malcolm just showed up. That's who he was. The three of them became like a little family, and they often escaped the loudness of Hollywood for private retreats. There was one special place, a quiet lake house just 2 hours outside of Atlanta. It wasn't luxurious, but it was peaceful. They had been there many times before. The last time they visited, it was late spring. The weather was perfect. Jasmine's daughter had just turned 10, and Malcolm had come to help celebrate. They grilled, played board games, and laughed deep into the night. He read to Amara before bed, just like he had since she was a toddler. But the next morning, everything changed. Let me tell you, this is the part that no one saw coming. It started like any other day. Jasmine was setting up a small picnic while Malcolm stood nearby with his coffee, casually watching Amara play near the edge of the lake. It all seemed so normal. Birds were chirping, and the lake looked calm, like glass. Amara had begged to go into the shallow water like she always did, and Jasmine said yes. The lake always felt safe. But what they didn't see was a hidden drop-off just a few feet out. It was a sharp fall under the surface, something dangerous, something easy to forget, and then a slip, a splash, and a scream. Jasmine turned around to see Amara flailing in the water. Her small body was sinking fast. Jasmine froze. She couldn't move. Her mind went blank. But Malcolm didn't even hesitate. Without saying a word, without taking off his shoes, he dropped his coffee, ran, and dove straight into the lake. This is where the story takes a turn no one expected. And the craziest part, he didn't come back up. Malcolm hit the water with full force, fully dressed, phone still in his pocket. There was no thought, just pure instinct. He swam straight to where Amara was drowning. Jasmine, still frozen on the dock, snapped out of her shock and ran into the lake, but Malcolm was already there. He grabbed Amara and pushed her toward the shallow side, shouting for her to kick her legs. Jasmine rushed in to grab her daughter, and for a moment, It seemed like everything was going to be okay. But here is the shocking part. When Jasmine looked back, Malcolm was gone. She screamed his name over and over. She dove under the water, searching. But he didn't surface. And deep inside, she already knew something had gone terribly wrong. Within minutes, emergency services were called. But it took nearly 20 minutes to find him, his body barely a few feet away from the dock. He had hit his head on a rock underwater. It was a freak accident, the kind no one could have predicted. The man who just saved a child was gone. Just like that, Jasmine collapsed on the shore, holding her daughter in one arm, screaming Malcolm's name into the air. Her cries echoed across the trees. Even the paramedics were shaken. They didn't just pull a man from the water. They pulled out someone the entire nation knew and loved. But to Jasmine, this wasn't about fame. She had just lost her best friend, her brother in spirit, the man who gave his life for her child. But what happened next? That's what left everyone confused. Jasmine Guy disappeared from the public eye. There were no statements, no press conferences, no memorial tweets, no emotional Instagram captions, nothing, just silence. And that silence, oh, it spoke louder than any words ever could. People were confused, rumors spread, news outlets reported a drowning accident, but the details were vague. Friends of Malcolm posted cryptic tributes, and co-stars from The Cosby Show and A Different World mourned publicly. But Jasmine, she vanished. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Behind that silence, there was something even deeper happening. According to a family friend, Jasmine wasn't just grieving, she was completely shattered. She blamed herself. She kept thinking, if I had just told her not to go into the water, if I had stood closer, if I had remembered that drop-off, the guilt consumed her. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't eat. She began seeing a therapist under an alias to avoid media attention. And her daughter, the poor girl, started having panic attacks and refused to go near any body of water. Jasmine was watching her child suffer and couldn't even begin to explain what they had both lost. People started asking questions. Why hasn't Jasmine said anything? Why no tribute? Why no funeral details? But what no one realized was that she didn't want this turned into a Hollywood story. She didn't want Malcolm's final act of love to become tabloid gossip. She feared the media would twist everything, splash it across headlines, and reduce it to cheap drama. She wasn't just protecting her own grief. She was protecting Malcolm's legacy. The quiet man who never needed attention, who never asked for anything, even when he gave everything. Nearly a year passed, and still, Jasmine said nothing. No appearances, no interviews. She skipped red carpet reunions, award shows, and even panels honoring a different world. Fans began to assume she had retired or fallen ill, but the truth was far heavier. Jasmine was carrying a pain that words couldn't explain. She didn't want the world's sympathy. She didn't want to answer questions she wasn't ready for. But destiny, as always, had its own plans. And this time it led to a moment that no one saw coming. It wasn't on a major talk show, not on Oprah, not on The View. It happened on a small podcast called Sister Circle Soul Talks, hosted by an old friend. The show had a modest following and was never meant to go viral. But during a calm conversation about healing, the host gently asked Jasmine, "How are you really doing since the accident?" And just like that, everything changed. Jasmine froze, her eyes filled with tears. She hadn't planned to speak, but the silence became too heavy to carry. She whispered, "He died saving my daughter. He died because of us." The room fell silent. The host didn't interrupt. And Jasmine, she finally let it all out. She described the weekend in heartbreaking detail. The laughter, the calm lake, the sound of Malcolm joking that morning about needing stronger coffee. He even promised to take Amara to the bookstore after lunch. And then, nothing, she said. Just water, screams, and silence. But the craziest part, Jasmine revealed a conversation Malcolm had with her 2 days before the accident. It chilled her to the bone. They had been sitting by the lake, enjoying the peace. Malcolm suddenly looked out at the water and said, "If I had to go out tomorrow, I just hope I go out doing something that matters." Jasmine had laughed it off at the time, told him to stop being so deep. But now, she couldn't stop thinking about those words. Did he know? Did he sense something coming? Or was it just fate whispering through him? That one moment made everything feel different. Jasmine said Malcolm was always intuitive. He felt things before they happened. He could walk into a room and know who was hurting without them saying a word. So maybe, just maybe, some part of him knew that he was going to protect them no matter the cost. Her voice cracked, tears streamed down her face, and for the next few minutes there was no sound. Just Jasmine softly crying. It wasn't for attention, it wasn't rehearsed, it was raw, painful, and real. Within 48 hours, the clip went viral. Millions shared it across TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. The hashtags Malcolm the Hero and Honor Malcolm-Jamal started trending. Fans around the world mourned him all over again, but this time with a deeper understanding. Malcolm wasn't just the boy next door from a sitcom. He was a man who gave his life for someone he loved. A real hero, quiet, brave, selfless. But just when everyone thought the story had reached its most emotional point, Amara, Jasmine's daughter, added something that changed everything once again. What makes this story different? It's not just what Malcolm did. It's what he left behind in his final seconds. For years, Amara had stayed silent. She was only 10 when it happened, and Jasmine had made sure to protect her from the media, the headlines, and the endless questions. But as she grew older, the memory of that day never left her. It stayed with her, every detail, every second. And when she finally spoke, the world heard the part of the story that even Jasmine didn't know. Amara sat down with a trusted family therapist, Dr. Kesha Lorne, in a quiet, private setting. No cameras, just truth, and what she revealed stunned everyone. "I remember slipping," she said. "One second I was laughing and the next, the ground under me disappeared." She recalled the water filling her lungs, the silence, the fear, the darkness. And then a shadow moving fast through the water. "It was Malcolm," she said softly. "He grabbed me so fast I felt his arms around me. He told me to kick my legs." But here's where it gets emotional beyond words. What she said next left even Jasmine in tears. "When he pushed me forward, he touched my cheek," Amara whispered. It was soft, gentle, like he was saying goodbye. That single gesture, underwater, unnoticed by anyone else, became the final proof of just how selfless Malcolm was. Even in his last moment, he didn't panic. He didn't scream. He comforted her. He made sure she felt safe, even as he let go. Let that sink in. He had enough strength to save her, but not enough to save himself. And still, he used his last breath not just to push her toward life, but to leave her with peace. That one moment changed Amara forever. She said it became her light in the darkness. "He gave me life," she said, "not just by pulling me out of the water, but by showing me what love really looks like." Since then, Amara quietly became an advocate for water safety and child trauma awareness. She avoided the spotlight, never attended Hollywood events, but she worked behind the scenes, raising money, creating programs, and building something in Malcolm's name. She didn't do it for applause. She did it to honor him, the man who made the ultimate sacrifice. In Jasmine, she had no idea about that final underwater goodbye. When she watched Amara's interview, she broke down. "He was saying goodbye," she kept repeating. "He gave her peace before he let go." But the tribute wasn't over. There was one last thing Jasmine needed to do, one last promise to keep. Malcolm's memorial wasn't a star-studded red carpet event. It was held quietly at a small art center in Atlanta. No cameras, no press, just those who truly knew the man behind the fame. In the middle of the room was a simple black and white photo, not of Malcolm on a red carpet, but of him laughing, holding Amara in his arms. That was who he really was. Near the end of the service, Jasmine stood up. Her hands were shaking, her voice barely steady, but her words, they hit straight into the heart. "We always talk about how someone died," she began, "but today I want to talk about how he lived." She spoke of their bond, the way he always showed up when she was at her lowest, how he was the godfather her daughter never asked for, but desperately needed. She told stories that made people laugh and cry, but the most powerful thing she said, Malcolm didn't die saving someone. He died being exactly who he always was. Someone who put others first, someone who didn't need attention to do something extraordinary. That room, full of actors, artists, old friends, fell into tears, not because they lost a celebrity, but because they lost a soul who had quietly made the world better. At the end, Jasmine looked up and said, "You saved her. You saved me. And we will never stop telling the world who you really were." And they didn't. Tributes appeared across Atlanta, New York, LA, murals, community projects, and a legacy program in Malcolm's name focused on mentoring young Black boys. Jasmine and Amara turned their pain into purpose. And Malcolm's name became more than a credit on a TV screen. It became a symbol of love, bravery, and sacrifice. So now that you've heard the full story, how will you remember Malcolm-Jamal Warner? As Theo Huxtable, as a Hollywood star, or as the man who gave everything quietly without expecting anything in return? Let his story live on. Because heroes like Malcolm, they never really leave us.